Boy, oh boy, persistent crickets. Waiting for the harvest. That means you folks, all y'all that are. Again, there's nothing I can change about all that. We either step up or we get taken over. We're taken over with the people that are doing the taking over by all kinds of means and manners. And so I don't know, I continually think, what can I do different? Can I get rid of those crickets? Can I move on to other things? What can I show you? And I didn't respond to it last night. Cowboy Tech said, just keep putting out there what needs to be put out there. And that's what I try to do, and it's just another confirmation that's what I need to do. So I appreciate that acknowledgement again. And there's nothing that I say behind the woodshed that isn't going to probably, I say probably because there's always no uncertainties. You don't know how things would change. But for the most part right now, with the condition we have, you're not really picking up what I'm talking about. Taking those principles to heart and turning them around and starting to use them. Things are not looking very good for a lot of us for a long, long time. And so I just thought about it. I haven't really thought, I couldn't come up with anything more about it, but I think I remember talking about a darkness that I saw a long time ago on the broadcast. And what's interesting is I really gave it up to that. I stated it. I said there was something I couldn't see through a time, and I can't remember what year that was. I think it was around 2011. But there was a darkness that we were going to go through, at least by what I was looking at. And I said that, as I could figure that out, that was going to be a time when there was a decision to be made. And that decision would happen over some short time. And the decision the people made, all these people, all of us around the world, and particularly wherever we are, whatever rights we had, we were going to be making this decision over a short time, and that means a couple of years. And then at the end I could see, even though I couldn't see through this dark space, at least thinking about stuff, there was something coming that was like a light at the end of the tunnel, if you would, but it wasn't a light. It was just what it came to me was the darkness is a point when the mass of the people are making decisions. The answer to that will happen right after that, and we will reap what we sow or didn't sow. And it just occurred to me the other day that I had forgotten all about that part, and I hadn't thought about it at all. So apparently it's now being told to me again, we're in that time. We're in the time that we are reaping what we sowed or did not sow. It's not over, but this is what happens when we didn't take responsibility. And this will continue to be what happens to us when we don't take responsibility. That we are in that time now. My thought is, and what came to me is, we didn't do really what we needed to do. We had an opportunity to choose to do the right and better thing, and we were complacent. We have been those crickets. And that's going to be our downfall continuously. As soon as we get involved and we take the responsibility to find that thing we need to make right and make it right, that it can change. It can still change. But the general mass populist decision was made. And to my thinking and looking, it wasn't made to be responsible. It was made to really be taken over. And so I want to preface that. It occurred to me, these things, little revelations happened. It occurred to me I hadn't thought about that darkness. And it's been so many years, and when it happened, I couldn't even remember. But it comes to me now as I think a little bit back. That was our decision we made, and I think we're going to be seeing this. We're reaping what we didn't sow, if I can say it that way. It can still be changed, but the momentum is truly against us as we keep moving into these things. Even so, though, I get the flash in my mind. Another voice wants to tell me, yeah, but look at all the things going on that people don't know about that when you just step up are happening. And we have lots of subtle victories going on, and so I might actually get something of that today. I don't know. I have so many tabs to go through, so much information that there's just not enough time to touch it. And I don't know, I'll get to the point where what good is it if not many people are listening? And last week, it happened again. I was trying to tell people the big deal. The title of the broadcast was, I think it was the ignorant versus the clueless. And then the second statement was the 99.999%. And not a lot of people want to listen to that, I suppose. I think you kind of know in your heart what you're up to, what you're into, what you're not doing. And so, well, I actually went down and calculated. If my calculations are right, that means there's only about 350 of us that are able right now to do much of anything. And I already know I can claim a couple of my colleagues involved with what we're doing, so I know that some of those numbers are taken on. But it's not really knowing. I don't know. It's gonna, like I said, most of the problem is not seeable. It's needs to be. It's just going to happen on its own. I don't know what to say. You're going to see no evidence of what you do. You're not going to see the fruition of a lot of work that you do. But you'll see the slow steps of that work toward having it work better. And there's only going to be far and few in between. You're not going to. It's not the revolution. Like I was, the revolution's not going to be televised. But the truth of what's going on will be behind the woodshed, and any other place like this. So let me, as I say, before I forget, because I run on. My mind gets going. BTWRLM235. As we go on to this for the past cast or podcast or the recast on UCY on Thursday, you'll be able to get the content I post. And now it's just links. Anybody wants to see the depth and keep researching, then that's what it's there for. Again, there's not that many people. There's not that many people that are really wanting to do a lot of this, and I can't expect it. But there's enough people that keep us going. There's a lot of the naysayers. It's amazing how many naysayers do a whole lot of naysaying, but not really move into what they have to do. I don't know about that. I don't know about people. I don't really think about it. People want to ask me, "Well, do you know this guy, that gal?" No, I don't know any people. I'm looking at what they do, not who they are, and not what they're about. Everyone has their situations, and they make their choices. And all I'm trying to do is get people back, because it seems that we have an objective basis to follow. How about if we go back to the law and see how that starts working? Because right now we're finding out that a lot of people don't want to follow the law and make it sound like that they are. And you can be the one that actually makes that happen if you choose to. And again, you don't need to do it to get yourself too. You don't have to put yourself in jeopardy. So I've said all this before. Anybody who's been listening, it's going to be boring. Those of you who haven't heard it, just take it as the truth, and you'll find that out as soon as you jump in. So I'm going to continue here moving along. So we like to look at all kinds of stuff, and I'm really fascinated. Just the nature is really fascinating to me. I wish I could do more of that. I don't get out much, but for those of you that don't get out, you don't have to go very far. You look up at night, do a Draconid. The Draconid meteor shower to peak over this weekend. This will be tonight will be your last night for the bulk of it. But I wanted to call your attention to it. It might be kind of neat. I've been a little disappointed in some of these meteor showers. Some of these shooting stars, they just don't seem to be as big as I remember them when I was younger. So maybe we're taking out a lot of meteor shooting stars out of the sky as the Earth goes through the dust storm of a broken down comet or something. But anyway, pretty neat, pretty stable. Always going along, something that's kind of somewhat predictable, right? So it's not all falling apart, and we can kind of start looking at that if we want to. But those of you want to take a quick look, if you can do as we get the weather changing, maybe there's not an ability to get up there. But I want to remind everybody there's a world out there to see. It's nature, and it's real nature. It's not something that man can interfere with. It's not something that man can force. It's just what goes on, and we are so arrogant to believe we force anything. No, I didn't want to touch this at all. I really wasn't going to touch it, but there's so many things I want to look at. Again, I think I rationalized for me what the point of all this is, looking at events as examples, to check into our frailties, into our strengths, into our perception, identifying, really looking at testing ourselves, our powers of observation, and all this kind of thing on things that we may not actually ever get the actual answer to, but you can see which fulfill objectives which are predictable. And so that's kind of where I'm even going to touch this whole thing. And if you haven't known, there was a big event that happened in another shooting star of sorts in Las Vegas. And I want to remind you all, because this is I loosely keep track of what I say sometimes. Again, it's not a plan to you. I just talk about things that are within my example set, and what I do with help to people, and the accomplishments that we do. And I don't like to promote a lot of it ahead. I certainly don't promote any of it ahead of time, and somewhat reluctant to do much after. But we're doing a little bit more because we've got to start getting people to understand that they do have a power if they just step up. And so we're going to have another proof come out here, given I stop talking so much and get to it. But there was this. I wanted to tell you and remind you. I told you a long time ago, and I've asked you to look very carefully over time. Lots of things were happening in Europe to kill people. Lots of things and lots of excuses were used, and we went through some of the attacks where people died, and then they were bringing on more surveillance and more controls and all this. And I said, here's the model. Watch this over time. It's going to get worse and worse and worse. And then now we're having the things about the truck attacks and the car attacks and all this stuff, and more people dying. And I asked you, be careful to notice that it's not happening too bad in America. There's really nothing happening in America. Why is that? It's not like it's not like the government knows what's going on, even though they profess to know. So why is it that there's really nothing going on in America while there's the world's afire during this war on terror, which I tell you it's a war of terror, and it's the governments and the biggest and baddest ones in collusion bringing this on us. Watch how this plays out, because when you're not seeing it happen in America, that's a plan. And then I told you a while back, and I can't remember where it's at, I said, when they bring something to America, it's going to be big. They're going to make a notice of it for everybody. They have to. So while you're watching it happen in Europe, it wasn't happening in America. Well, I think we just saw that happen here in Las Vegas. And when it came out, it's now advertised as the most historic thing going. So it's fit the plan. And when that fit the plan, what happened there, and I took note, not because of the sensationalism of it, but okay, this is the execution of the plan. It was foreseeable, and they did bring it out in a big way. They're saying it's historic. Now, they discount everything else that the United States has done. You know, millions of people are dying. At least tens of thousands a day are dying at the hands of the United States government outside the country. They're dying at the hands of cops every day in the country, and other things. I'm going to go on and on. You all know about this. But I want to look at this a bit, this thing that happened, this shooting star during the time of the full moon, and the meteor shower, and Draco, and all this stuff. People have more time on their hands than I do can look all this. I just can use the words and know my mind goes everywhere to pick up all the connections, whether or not they're relevant or not. The point is they're all there, aren't they? That they did come out in a big way in Las Vegas. And there's been a lot of analysis of people going on, and yes, I'm doing a bit of it myself, but I'm doing it because I want to know about the frailty of my powers of observation, the consistency or not of whether or not I could anticipate certain things. In any plan, you're not going to, unless you're privy to it, you're not going to know the actual plan, but how things roll out. Looking at us as people, how do we respond? How we don't respond. Bringing that knowledge and awareness to something I don't normally do to me, so I can kind of look at things on at a micro level for where things I do. I was really intrigued by a lot of what happened in Vegas. Again, there's just so much to talk about, but I don't want to get lost. To me, it's a non-event because it seems to be a planned event. It was planned by whom I don't really know, but it certainly came by way of a path that could be absolutely predicted. And then we know through history and since 9/11, the government's wholly involved in a lot of these things. So who done it? Was this, not really that I'm going to answer this. I'm just saying my mind sets up, again, these categories of possibilities. And now I'm adjusting my mind to what's my perceptions, what do I buy into, and what do I find that I didn't do quite right, that I have to readjust? What do other people do? What leads and stuff are going on? What of the leads we have are rising to the top to be more plausible? Given that the government seems to do a lot of this, was this the FBI's plan? Is the FBI clueless? They're lying an awful lot right now. Did the CIA pull it off? Is it just an insanity, as I found out apparently there's a so-called motive called insanity? That's a wrong, whoever said that doesn't know what they're talking about. Insanity's not a motive. It's an excuse, it's an exoneration. So we have all this information going on that's wrong. And what intrigued me actually more so still right now as I talk about it, is observing how people, even the so-called professionals, didn't understand what was happening to them for 20, 30 minutes. Literally were clueless, and they were the ones being involved, whether that was literal, whether or not it was the part of the crisis part, if that was there going on. There's a lot of evidence of that. I won't get into any absolutes here. There's evidence for a lot of hanky-panky going on. There's evidence that it maybe, if I could get past the amount of lead and brass that should have been there on one guy, if I can get past that, and one guy could have pulled all that off, it was just that alone. But it's funny, it fits the plan. Now, it's also predictive in a way. If you know the society, you're pushing the society in different other points, it's going to eventually pop up. As someone who's doing that, you can plan for it. You just have to wait until it happens so-called naturally. So there's a lot that we can do it. But what I was interested in is our people failure, our failure to witness, our failure to be credible. Even the so-called professionals, we're clueless. We can't respond. We don't know what to respond to. We don't know how to respond. And then another observation, nobody was prepared to respond. And I'm not talking the government now, because they were partially prepared and partially not. It's that we, the people, were not prepared. And we were clueless to the whole point. And I just don't, my main thought was, because my thought was, I guess it kind of relates over to firefighting. When you see a fire, you charge the fire and put it out. Certainly you're assessing it as you run up, and if it's bigger than you, then you got to rethink. But why wasn't anybody going at the guy that was attacking 22,000 people? Then it dawned on me that everybody had been probably disarmed, and they were in a captive holding place that was perfectly known ahead of time. But nobody, except for maybe the cops, which didn't know what was going on for maybe 30 minutes. The ones on the ground didn't understand what was going on. They were just trying to get away. And all the stories were here, but nobody was prepared to go at an offender against them. So we have all this hullabaloo, and I call it the Mandalay effect, the spin-off of the Mandela effect. To me, this is a critical connection at some level. The Mandalay effect is all of this that we're looking at, but looking at it in our frailty, that we now focus all of our attention. I don't know if the Take a Knee went away, didn't it, real quick? Except for some murmurings, that North Korea got knocked off the page, and now we're looking at all this focus, and nobody is attacked when the United States, anybody's been murdering people everywhere around the world. We certainly do not attack or question over all this time the internal killings that are going on, not by a lone, given it is one, and he was insane. That's almost, if I can say, excusable. Nobody questions the so-called sane killings that are done domestically, so-called, by the cops. And so a report pops up, and we have it to see. Since 2016, cops have killed 3 times as many citizens than 4 decades of mass shootings combined. Combined, folks. Did we hear an uproar over it? No, but the government itself who's doing this now gets you focused on this shooter thing. I really am having a hard time. I want to talk about all the things, all the anomalies and the conundrums that are around this, but I got to be careful not to. I'm not here to really make any analysis that's about that. I'm wanting to have us look at ourselves. We are not a prepared people. We don't have powers of observation that we can rely on immediately, if not after. We will never, ever probably get the right answer. We will make up stuff, and we will claim it to be the correct thing. We will not look at the right stuff. And until we start getting these ideas straightened out in each one of us, and not to the point that it's all overwhelming and we don't do anything because it was a plan, we still have, if it's a plan, we still have a problem we have to go resolve. And I can't really touch the hypothetical of that. We have to resolve to that first, but we're not even close. And I told you also, we're at a time coming to a time you can't even surrender. You can't even do what you're asked to do without without a problem, you'll be coming to a time when you can't surrender, you'll be shot. We've seen plenty of evidence. Well, in the same time, where we're all focused on 59 or so people so-called shot, killed, I won't get into all that, and 500 some odd people injured, in comes what's going on about the domestic killers called the police. And in a time when you will all focus your minds on all this, I call it breads and circuses in any of this until I see different. If it's planned, then we have a problem there. It's still breads and circuses because it's going to try and change you. And if it changes your views politically, if I can put this context, your societal review, that is a terrorism. That's just the definition that you can go use. It's right out of the federal code. And I didn't go get it for you, but you can go find it if you want. That we see right today, everyone's all in this 59, this insane guy blows out windows and starts shooting people, a fish in a barrel, all confined in a space, all locked off. I mean, come on, this is nonsense. But nobody seems to want to raise their hands over something like this, where we see horrifying video shows cops kill a man as he had his hands in the air. Now, that really didn't even catch me. Why? Because we've seen it so many times before already in the last few years. What the story turns out to be, if I have this correct, and I just got this before I came on air, was someone was coming to turn in a weapon to the cops. For some reason, he wasn't there to threaten anybody. He was simply going to turn in a weapon because something had happened. And for that good deed, no good deed goes unpunished. He is deemed a threat, and they execute him. Is the epitome of the hypocrisy, the ignorance, the clueless, the ignorant, the disaffected, the disenfranchised, the dumb, the doof, all these things, the duped, everything. That I don't hear a bunch on this is really the tale of the tape. So not only can you come in singly and go in and try to do what's right anymore, as I told you, I predicted this I don't know how many years ago. You will not be able to do much before the military, who has in their mind that everybody is a terrorist. Even though that's the wrong application. Again, their definition, because they're empowered to do it. And you are disempowered because you won't stand up in your power. And so we have another proof. Don't call the cops. Don't try to go to the cops to do the right thing. Just make sure you realize they are the enemy and they will kill you. They have the answer. It's called I feared for my life. In fact, we were at a mining association meeting, and disappointed I couldn't get back to hear Breaker's Ball, but that's how this works. Sometimes you have to get involved. Where some miner was coming down a road at a so-called fire closure, we understand that that's not law, but they had a bunch of people with costumes on, pretending to be police and officials, who didn't like that he has a right to enter, even though there was a fire emergency going on. And those guys, anybody that works with me understands how to have the law brought out, and he did that. Well, he went up to his claim. When he comes back out, the gang had gotten together with them and decided he was psychologically unstable. And another out-of-state officer comes during this time to confront him on that. Never talked to our miner. Never talked to him before to come out the first words out of his mouth that, you okay? You sound like you're having a little bit of, psychological trouble here. That's a serious problem. So we're going to have that addressed at some point. The miner's stepping up to do that for himself and for everybody else. That psychological thing is absolutely the threat they use one of the other threats they use against us. And there's really not a protection against that at that time. And if you don't survive the encounter, you won't have that record to prove what it really went down. When you do survive it, you better make that record of what really went down. And I just wanted to convey that. That just popped in my mind. But we don't make the records we need to do in face of this military that comes to kill us. You presume they have all the techniques to get you in trouble. You don't even know it's coming. it's coming so fast at you, you start to see exactly the failure of your observations and your ability to cope. You hear stories about people who their feet were going in the right direction, and their mind said, well, I got to stick here in this. It's a really interesting observation going on in lots of different areas than just, there's a killer that killed somebody, and whoever helped him and what all that. And it's all interesting, and it's all I'm not putting a lot of time into it. I have my possibilities and probabilities. I have my some analysis that was done. I have no capacity to do the analysis I want to do, especially with the audio stuff and the timing sequences and the comparing of sound files and structural stuff. I'd love to be able to have all that. I'd love to have an audio lab. I don't. So I don't have. It's not going to help anything. Actually, it would just give me an insight on analysis and how to check my powers of observation. But we don't have a clue about, we don't have a sense in us to protect another guy who is absolutely innocent, trying to do the right thing, and is gunned down by the same cops that are investigating a so-called mass shooting that they want to claim was done by some guy on his own for some reason. Doesn't have any proof at all. Would they come out and start lying to you? I want to touch a little bit about that. The reason why they're doing that, as I can understand investigation, is they're looking for people, given this is real, and given this is a lone nut type thing, or even with some help, they're looking to make questions and give information that when they approach you, whenever that might be, if that is, that when you have information that's not the public information, they can identify you. And so this is a tactic. Everyone's starting to say, oh, they're lying. Yeah, well, they're misdirecting so that they can, when they go talk to people, and apparently they're talking to a lot of people, they can pick out who has the information that they know that no one else really ought to know. And partly because they are deceiving. Now, however that works, I'm not deciding it. I'm just saying that's our powers of perception. That's what we focus as people. Now, I can see the so-called alt-right, we got all this deception going on. But at some point, there's a reality. If this is a real thing, then they have to really, really find stuff. They got to find out what's real. I'm all hesitant about that because I don't know what anymore. These people, the FBI is a criminal organization. I've already told you our experience with that. It was like no different than this guy with the gun. We went to the agency, the agent itself who was doing felonies and treason, and we said, show cause how you're not doing that. And the FBI didn't come and investigate that problem. No, they came and attacked our chairman and us when we did that. The FBI is a treasonous organization now. It's all over. Your thoughts of all this normality, it's the new normal. It's the depravity of it. It's done, folks. We got to get past it. So I don't get too lost in too much. I do get interested in some things, but more of it's how do they keep things transparent to us? And how do we start dismantling that is really what I started to focus. What are some clues that might be there to show us it's a setup? What are some clues that are not necessarily, or they're more coincidences that kind of could lead somewhere? Can they mean something? How do we look at things at a distance right ahead of time to qualify how this is or is not something? And maybe if it isn't something, but it's being used for something as a tool, we don't look at the thing as a tool. We don't look at the tool doing the screwing and the screwdriver. No, we look at the hand and the arm and the body that's attached to that screwdriver doing the screwing of the screw. So that's what I tend to start to look at. Again, powers of observation, we're sitting at a distance. I wasn't there. None of this means any, as I said, I think in the RLM chat. It's all illusion. None of that's any evidence. Everything I see has this big question mark on it. Was it Photoshop? What is it real? When was it time? Who was source? All this nonsense. But there is information streams that come through, and that's check what you fix on and what ideas you come up with, how you hold those ideas, how you're resistant to moving and changing under new evidence. Use these things to check yourself. One coincidence that occurred to me, not immediately, just as time went on. It's funny how, again, time passes before certain things start to make themselves important, whether or not they may be important. Just little things that also could tie in through some, kind of interesting logical sequence of things. And it occurred to me many, many days later, the name of the guy, the shooting star, now on the stage. His last name was what? What was his last name? His name was Paddock, P-A-D-O-D-O-C, Paddock. That occurred to me. Let's go look. I usually do this before. I hadn't done it now. in this case, but let's go look at the word paddock. It's usually described to be an enclosed area, especially for pasturing and exercising animals. Well, what's a human but an animal? What's the concert but was sealed off as to keep 22,000 humans contained? Breads and circuses, entertainment. On what? We're talking animals, and typically this is, horses and cows and all this stuff. What was the music that was being played? I understand was a Western concert, and a little bit further stretch, and maybe not. Maybe to the point of the prairie chicken. What was his first name? Stephen. Step hen. Now, little range, but still in the Western theme, still in the still in the animal sector. How is this? Why wasn't he named just John Smith or anything else? Oh, John Smith could, I guess, be the smith that made his weapons, the gunsmith, right? Okay, so these points can be pretty well extenuated. My point is why you got 3 or 4 different coincidences just in the name. As if you saw the guy's name relative to what was going on, you say, "Oh, this is like one of those jokes that's played on people." The people that make these, if this is a plan, and there's some evidence that this was, even if it's an insane plan, they actually think it's a joke to be able to put this forward. This is another potential to show you that it's not what it's all cracked up to be, and if it isn't, then there's somebody pulling this off, whether I can identify it. Like I told you for 9/11, as soon as I got to the TV, it wasn't like a rush. I happened to walk in or turn it on or walked into a room with the TV. I can't quite remember now. I looked at the point. I got understanding. It took a few seconds to figure out, and I said, all my comment was they went and done it. I didn't care who. I didn't care how to identify. It had no more interest for me than they went and done it, and I knew what it was going to mean. And so I got catapulted way into the future of what I already had been reading for a decade or so about what was coming, who said it, and why. And the FBI was connected to that as well. And so I won't go into all this. I just want to point out how we can connect up things, now there is a coincidence. I'm not a guy, you've already heard me say, I don't believe there's no coincidence. If 2 things happen at a point or in time or whatever, a contemporary, temporal type place, they happen together, it's a consequence. There's a thing. Does it have a meaning is what I'm looking for, though. I don't know that part. We need more information. But it at least has to come up on your mind and say, oh, wow, this is at least there. And that kind of feeds into this other thing. These people were having a lot of fun with making this plan. Oh, let's make his name Paddock, and he shoots into a human Paddock. Playing Western music. Okay, maybe far out. My point is what's our powers of observation? And the Internet's a cool thing because you get to see what lots of people's observation is. What I'm asking us is be careful not to buy into a whole lot of it. Really, hold these things out, because I don't know unless you were standing there yourself, and I have to question witnesses that are a part of a victimization or a crime, or a part of a crime being done. I don't think that their witness may be very good to begin with, and we've talked about all of that. So this is, again, the point for me. Let's look at ourselves with this. We're not going to solve this. This was predictable. It came in the big way I knew it would had to. To me, that's a setup. That's a long-term plan. Again, social engineering comes to mind. There's some objects. Obviously, you also know that was going to be for more surveillance coming and the gun control and all this nonsense that seems to roll with it. But we have the observations come out. It was an inside job again. And the observation here, as an opinion in the New York Times, terrorist plots hatched by the FBI came right on out. The United States has been narrowly saved from lethal terrorist plots in recent years, or so it has seemed. A would-be suicide bomber who was intercepted on his way to the Capitol, a scheme to bomb synagogues and shoot Stinger missiles at military aircraft was developed by men in Newburgh, New York, and a fanciful idea to fly explosive-laden model planes into the Pentagon and the Capitol was hatched in Massachusetts. What's their connection? All these dramas were facilitated by the FBI, whose undercover agents and informers posed to terrorists offering a dummy missile, fake C4 explosives, a disarmed suicide vest, and a rudimentary training. Suspects naively played their parts until they were arrested. This opinion goes on to explain how the defenses against that don't work and why. You might want to, for those of you in the future that are going to be doing this, you may want to see not to use those examples. Otherwise, we see the FBI is the plotter and the planner. Okay, we can pretty well attach that. We saw that coming. That's not even a question. So, there we have an opinion coming out of the New York Times of all places. So, what's going on here? But we're seeing the truth is coming out, but in a demurred way. They actually say that this is okay. They actually justify some of this because the courts have said you can set up someone who's insane, has a mental defect, has other problems, has some sort of a bias in themselves, something that might have been developed like through pharmaceuticals. If they're not quite to the edge, they'll push him over. The FBI is involved. So, another player comes right up. This wasn't even a hard thought, but the opinion came out in the New York Times of all places. What I thought was interesting, something I've talked to you about. Again, I don't document it so well. I just tell you about it. Other people tell you about it. I'm not the only one, but there's not that many that actually see this that quick. To come out in the New York Times, I thought was very interesting. And then we come up with today, I understand, or within a time here, within a day or so, another surveillance player steps up. And what I thought was interesting about this is what he talks about and how much credit he's given by people to think that he's the know-all, be-all of some inside information, like it's not unknown to any of us, which is now another type of observation about how they disempower you with what you think you know and put it all in a few people that you get. A lot of people tend to think have an authority or an inside track. Well, who pops up today? Now, you just heard me read the New York Times a couple days ago talking about the FBI setting all this stuff up. Did they do the Vegas? That's not my point. They could have, certainly. But it could have been just this insane guy that they set up. There's other people working. Who knows? The picture what got me was when they showed the picture of the so-called shooter. That's a new normal, okay? They don't do that. They don't want to give scene shots because they don't want people to know stuff unless it's a setup. And then they're filtering out who knows what versus what the setup was. They don't normally show those people right up front. When they did, I said that's another coincidence of a plan. That guy was probably thought he was part of the deal. He didn't know he was the deal. And so, who knows who's being played? But who know in the surveillance side of this and the supposed information control and leaking? Who other than Julian Assange steps up in our news today? WikiLeaks Julian Assange just revealed are the terms here. What really happened in Las Vegas, and it is bad for the FBI. Well, didn't we just hear from the New York Times days before? When you read the article, and I won't read it I won't say any more about it. Didn't New York Times expose that too? Didn't we know that before even the New York Times was wanting to agree to it? Absolutely. And so here we have the constraining the focus on, again, the same players on this stage over these certain types of conditions. Just the inert observation of this gets me. Again, the players come together and tell us the obvious, and yet they're touted as revealing anything. As I said in 2001, I just said they went and done it. Now, if you didn't believe me when I was telling you this was coming, maybe you'll believe Julian Assange, because he's supposed to be the answer man. But he's not. Now, we can buy into all this stuff, and the fact that he steps up and doesn't qualify how he got this information, he probably got it from just common sense in the right way here. Just generic observation with a clear mind would pull a lot of this together. No, he's the answer. He's the center of all there is, and I have a problem with that. I hope you have a problem with that. He points him out again. What is his place in all this? And if it's not a real place, what's the place they're fabricating to make it sound like there is a place? And we have to categorize all of that. I told you this a long time ago, and I repeat it periodically. Put your information in categories and possibilities and potentials. Don't hold fast to any unless you can absolutely hear, taste, smell, touch, whatever all the physical attributes are of things that you focused on. Always questioning whether or not your information was quality. So, again, I'm wanting us to know. Let's look at this from our what we can get for ourselves as we work through our failures to help ourselves and other people. Like I said, I probably put a lot more time in this after I started to realize what I wanted to kind of do with this information. I put a lot more time into looking at things just so I could feel comfortable to tell you even that much. And I think that's why I'm calling and telling you, I'm communicating that today. I think I'm really clear about that today. And in fact, it didn't start gelling until this morning after I even had my tabs up. I was able to go find some other things that pull this together, this aspect in our failures and the failures of those around us and our incapacities. That brings it up. This is an example to exactly analyze all that. Let me bring up another thought that really occurred to me right off the bat. And I told it to you before I started here, when I got started, is nobody, like if it was treated like a fire, no one went charging the building, if you will. Now, there were the cops, but that's the normal kind of response. They were delayed. But nobody in the paddock, where the animals were being kept, sealed off, no one seemed to be able and couldn't actually protect themselves. And I find that really fascinating in a nation that says you're supposed to keep a republic and the government may at one time attack you and you have to be ready at about any time, actually. Actually, you have to be ready at any time. That humans, would allow themselves to be herded into a paddock unarmed and required to be unarmed in such a way they could not fulfill their Second Amendment at any time or maybe even a felony arrest where someone came in. That they were willfully shed of their right to bear arms, that they could not respond to an attack, is really the epitome of what I tell you. If you think the Second Amendment is going to save you right now, the way we see it, you just got a big example. Maybe you should rethink yourself. And I saw a couple, I don't remember now where I saw them, but a couple people respond, like meme-type things. That's what it was. It was showing a Vietnamese man with his little straw hat in a rice field, and that was the comment. You think the government can stop this? Well, I don't think you're the Vietnamese man in the rice paddy. That's first thing. You walk yourself in and don't have another thought. Put yourself in a paddock. That can happen, you human animal. And you bring yourself defenseless. What'd you expect? That I don't know if you are really paying attention to how they're teaching you how you're not going to be able to respond. Now, I don't necessarily think it's coming that way, but I'm trying to show you we have to cut through a lot of the nonsense in our brains. And when you start shedding yourself of all the things that will most likely not work or will be so horrendous to try and get to work, that I hope you come to the conclusion if you start working now in the more proper ways, and there's a mindset more proper in this country, they won't be able to pull this stuff off, and you won't have to be so defenseless. We don't get into the week or so of time that everyone's looking at each other to try and be the one that finds the clue that answers all the Columbos and all the citizen journalists and all the MSM and all the lies and the fake news. We don't get into that, Brett. That's an entire bread and circus at my mind. So I just wanted to point out to me, and I still got it in me. I said what my mind was. I tried to put myself there. Why wasn't anybody going at the building? Why weren't they attacking the building? Why didn't anybody pull out their concealed arm? Nevada's not known for its gun restrictions. Why wasn't anybody pulling out anything and trying to do cover fire for anybody? Why wasn't it when they pulled their weapons out, why didn't they do cover fire in an organization so they didn't expend all their ammunition? Why don't we have that sense in us? Now, it's possible maybe a handgun may not reach there, but that's a problem then, didn't you? You put yourself in a place that you could be attacked without a response. But as I put myself there and said, why wouldn't I respond? Well, I realized I wouldn't have a weapon, would I? Because it would have been stripped from me. I would have allowed myself into a place to be stripped of it, and allowed a mentality that allowed the stripping of it. Which means that you're not capable as a people to be around each other, and you are susceptible to whatever controls who do have the guns. So those that want to do gun control, you're always going to have someone with the guns. It's who is going to have it? The ones that are controlling you, or you to control them? Or this kind of an action? So whether or not a handgun could have reached so many yards away with accuracy, I don't know. I know you start slinging lead, it goes quite far. Whether or not you're going to be really killing anything is not the point. Can you keep the guy's head down? Can you get people moved out of the way? That wasn't the response. If you put yourself in those positions and you are Second Amendment, give it up. Just stop. Stop. And I realized I was going to be there. I'd be in there if I made that decision to go to that Western concert in that paddock. I wouldn't have had an arm. I'd be stupid to think about charging it. Well, actually, it seemed to me that would probably, as I thought about it more, charging the building was probably the best way to get you out of the line of fire, wasn't it? So even common sense wasn't working there. Now, I'm sure by the time you got to the building, a lot of people were going to know there was a shooter in that building. Lots of guards got shot. So you without a gun is not going to do much anything, are you? So you're useless to the whole situation. You may have been useless if you have a handgun because it may not have actually been able to go that far. I mean, with any kind of an authority. I'm not so sure that wouldn't. Even if I'm lobbing 45 rounds up into a window area, the guy's going to have to be careful. I don't want to get hit by a 45 coming out of a gun, even if it's on its down trajectory. Do you? I don't care if I've got to shoot to the sky to get it over there. If it lands around that window somewhere, I'm going to point it out there. That's what artillery's about. So why didn't we have that in us? And those of you that think about the Second Amendment and charging and protecting people, you just got owned. That's all I just tell you. And you got to come to terms with that. Okay, I'm not making a judgment. I'm saying what's in our minds as people. We're proving we're susceptible to this entire thing, whether it's insanity, FBI, CIA, you name it, Antifa. I don't know. I got all these things in my mind. The ridiculous. I don't get to the ridiculous either, but my mind starts going up. It's like a comedy show. You know, someone who just got his cornflakes stomped on by an elephant is out there going to shoot you now because he got his cornflakes stomped on. I don't know. How ridiculous do we go? Well, we did not respond, I guess is my observation. Nobody was capable of responding. That's not a populace that at any moment's ready to defend themselves, whether by felony, whether by attack on them privately, by like something like this, even by a one-on-one combat or against the government itself. Which plays that card it plays very close to the vest how it is doing you in any way, so that's not necessarily the first line of response. Again, my mind wants to talk about a lot of things, but I don't want to really do that. I want us to observe our incapacities, because that's what's being preyed on. We're told about that. Remember the protocols of the elders of Zion. I didn't think about it till just now, but that hit me so hard of the truth. I don't care who they say originated. I don't care whether or not it's counterfeit, which implies it was a real copy somewhere. I don't care. The truth that was being told in that, as I told you before, it devastated me to actually accept it. Actually taking it and understanding, not believing. I could see it was telling me certain truths about me. And they were exploitable, and I'm telling you, because of that, I realize you ain't no different. I don't care what you claim race is. I told you the example of a race in the Doubleday Dictionary in 1974 is the race of lawyers, so color ain't got nothing to do with it, and as soon as you buy into all that nonsense, you're took. You're owned too. That when I found out that I am that vulnerable, I realized, wow, everyone else around me is the same way. They sure done us good. And I've taken all these decades to keep working hard, understanding I still have my frailties, to try and have less of them. And I'm asking you to do that self-assessment and then start to apply it. And we take lots of reasons to not to get active, and the whole answer to us is to engage. And I'm asking you to do it the evolution should be the way you engage. It shouldn't be biological evolution, because that's a lie. There's no proof of it. I shouldn't even say if it's a lie, but there's certainly no proof of it any more than anything else, just like all this stuff. But our evolution is how we know ourselves better and how we know about ourselves better, how we interact, how we can interact, and if we have an empathy, or sympathy, or just a better mind in ourselves, and certainly from a spirit with a good soul, do we intend to do better? That dark area I told you, I don't think we decided to go there. And I'm still here to play crickets, and I'm still here to talk to you like this. So it's not done. It was just, I think there was a time, literally, I was shown a dark space in societies, all societies, in mankind from about around, I can't remember for sure, 2011, 2012. I told you about it. And then I said I couldn't know, so I gave it up. I said I can't know anyway, so why fret over it? And then I find myself till today, and I realize I went through that space, and I now see we're at the other side. And now I see the ramifications. That happened, folks. We're there. And we see this stuff. It almost like it came out at the right time as well. The full moon, all this stuff. We can kind of pull this together. Is it coincidental? Yes, simply coincidental. Does it mean anything? I don't know. Can we put a meaning on it? Sure. I guess this is the analysis that you go through. It sounds like a lot of work. It's really not. Our brains really do work pretty fast, even though they may not work as fast as certain other systems. They work fast, and they work in ways that are pretty astonishing. And so, I won't harp on that more. Please take all these things as object lessons. Understand how you understand what's going on. How fast you won't respond is the big one for me is how much even trained people could not respond. They had no clue what was going on. They did almost everybody did the wrong thing. If you just listen to their stories. One woman actually divorced herself from her natural response to flee immediately and looked at everybody around and hunkered down. Hunkered down when there was someone supposedly 32 stories above them shooting down into the paddock of human animals captured there, would hunker down thinking that was a protection instead of getting up and running like the wind. It's really astonishing to me. And a mass of people did that. And so if you think you're immune from all this stuff, I'm asking you to rethink that part and really start to make it just come to my mind, just like Gary L. and Gigi's boo, 2 hours after my broadcast, take the road less traveled. That's in every action you do, because apparently we can actually see the herd is going to kill you. So I don't know, again, I don't know what more to say about that. And I'm going to just make a quick comment. I understand that we're having problems with the hookup today, and I don't know why. And I have been starting every time I see it or see a flash in the chat room that it's gone down, I reconnect it. And so I do realize that is going on. You probably don't hear me, but I am putting the encoders back on today, and I don't know why they're disconnecting at all. So I apologize, but the past cast will be, I hope that my one encoder for the recorder is working. That's the one that goes up after in case this happens. I get to put up audio that's cleaned up a bit for all the noise that I can clean up. And so apologize for that. For those of you on live, if you hear me now, it should be up again. It's about the 10th time it's gone, I think, if I can, maybe not quite short of that. But moving on, I think, as we see the governments coming and using all these war of terror tools against us, and we just keep sucking it up. Right during this time, Britain announces 15 years in prison for reading banned literature. Talking about burning books, folks, over the Internet. The Internet has been controlled. We're going to have to get a handle on that. This so-called banned literature is really an amazing problem, but this is where they've got most people. They got you into deciding that you can make a decision on what's bannable. And in my mind, if you got a bunch of clearly thinking people, then you need to have every piece of information out there, and you watch yourself and you watch others, how they handle it, so you can also tell whether or not they're reliable. I mean, this is another analysis. You know, we say this in the Jefferson Mining District matters, and in the things in law, and the things we tell people that are in seats of decision that need to know the information. We start from the foundation, which is the law, and we start from, and I mean a really quality interpretation of it, and we always advance that, the narrow path, relative to that jurisdiction and what we are looking for ourselves for. We can't, I say, we've said this for years and years and years, we don't have the luxury of being wrong once. And so that's a pretty high bar, and I don't know what that means to some people, but and I don't know how arrogant this will sound. Relative to those things, I don't think we've missed once on what we produce, because we're very, very careful on how we do our analysis, what we make the analysis for, not the anal analysis like I heard commented before on another broadcast, which is the way I look at it as well. And I don't have another word for that, but at least not right now. But at any rate, there's again, looking at that we have a very concise way of looking at stuff and promoting it to be and doing it in a way that it is, not the opinions. That builds trust. It builds, technique. It builds confidence at some level. But there's that humble, really, the question. You can make it, you can slip. Watch that banana peel. And if your standard isn't that high, or you have no way to get to that standard, you're going to be diminished. Absolutely. That's an experiential statement, not one of my opinion. When I'm looking for info and I can't find it, and I have no way to cross-check something, it makes it much longer, much more hard, more difficult, and possibly gives you the possibility of having slipped on the banana and you don't know you're going down. All these things come to play. But British announces 15 years of prison for reading banned literature. They want to focus on this anything that promotes terrorism. And remember, under the United States law, any misdemeanor means you're an enemy combatant. You're in terrorism. So there's nothing that you can't do or not be put on you that won't be a terrorism. And so I don't want to say much more. I want you to be noticed. Britain has announced 15 years in prison for reading banned material. This is a book burning situation. This is a censorship at the government level. You better start understanding about your First Amendment rights and other things. I don't want to get into all that. By now you should all know about doing that. Let me put it, what came to my mind. Remember you have under the First Amendment of the United States Constitution, they tell you that the government's prohibited from interfering with the free expression. It's also prohibited from interfering with your free association. Now, if I can't get information because they're banning it, I can't see who's talking about that to actually make an idea of whether or not I want to associate with them. Because all of their communications now have been omitted from my ability to get at it. So I'm now put in a blind spot that I don't know if I want. Listen, people want to be nuts. They want to talk about all they want to talk about. You want to come off with a bunch of stuff that's nuts. I want to know about it because I don't want to mess with you. I don't want to have anything to do with you. It's like I don't talk about a lot of subject matters that seem to transfix lots of other people. And I guess I should name them, although I don't know, because I don't want to insult anybody on the ignorance of this. With all this, and I talk about it, but I talk about it based on the foundations that I understand. That isn't a question, it isn't a gray area. It's the things of how an analysis would go through that may still have an answer coming. Would be like the problem with so-called Jews, the national white supremacy stuff, Antifa. No, that's all a bunch of breads and circuits, a bunch of destruction and division. It has nothing to do with the facts. It has nothing to do with how you're supposed to think about stuff. If you locked into any of that, you're wasting your time, and you're causing your communication to be faulty. It's what I listen for in people. Again, I can do this pretty clearly in the subject matter I focus on, which is somewhat comprehensive. I know when you're talking junk, and I know it pretty quickly. I want to hear that. What? Not because I want to judge you, actually, but if you have something you want to do importance, and I hear you on the wrong track, and you're a good one, not someone that's trying to defeat people, I want to help you quick. And if you're not able to communicate this stuff, I may not be able to go help you is another problem. I'm not free to associate with or without and away from people that aren't able to communicate under what the government feels is a terrorism. And so be careful on all this coming, and you can all sit in crickets on all this. They're telegraphing that. I suppose it's coming in different ways. America has a pretty tough problem with this. I mean, the government stopping it, but they are encroaching, and I'm watching it. And they do it with a lot of programming, a lot of legislation, or even by what's it called, non-governmental type intrusions like ICANN. That's another big problem at one level. And they throw up a whole bunch of ideas, but they have the ability to shut people down. And there's really, I don't see the right in it. And I told you I may have to. In fact, it's getting time. I'm going to have to figure out what angle to pull. Too much to think about, but ICANN and a GoDaddy are simply thugs. They're just simply, in the way that they treat people, they're simply tyrants. And they try to do all this other stuff. It's private discussions, and they say they make unconscionable contracts with you. You didn't have a chance to be do anything with it on a so-called public utility, and they think they can run your life and steal your intellectual property. And that's why I do like the idea of intellectual property, for protecting just this sort of thing. And I've said in the past, for those of you who may be paying attention and taking notes and thinking about things, I don't mind setting a copyright on my material, because I found out when you look at it, the copyright allows me to maintain some control. If I don't have it, anybody can terrorize anything in it and say it's something that's not really mine, and keep it on mine, keep my name on it. And I've got no remedy for that. And so there's a little other ways to go through some of this thought. Do I actually hold the copyright? Not for people who want to use it and spread it around properly, but I'm realizing this law, so-called, allows you remedies that you don't have otherwise. And it's usually for the things when they go wrong. That's why I say when contracts go right, you don't think about it. When they go wrong, you're really looking for your contract. That was the only understanding you had. That was the only basis by which objectivity can be born. The questions within the gray areas of which are determined by a forum that you typically choose to get those ironed out when you weren't conceiving of those problems ahead of time, and they become relevant after the fact. So we're getting the notice that they're coming for you're coming for your book, so-called. They're coming for your speech. They're coming for your associations. As I was saying, it's not just the right to bear arms is not just about going after the government as much as equally as it is. You have a citizen's duty, if I can say that without causing everyone's ears to bleed. You have a duty within your society to arrest felonies, and why wouldn't you? And that felony arrest may require the use of an arm. Why aren't you ready with one in case that happens? Crime is surrounding us all the time. We're so out of that, we don't even understand that it's going on all the time. We're supposed to be making arrests. So why would you be counter to all this? Are you someone that are a felon, and so you don't want other people to have guns to arrest your felony? Is that why you're counter to this, right to keep and bear arms? I don't know. But that's a different type of way to look at why the arm is important, because it helps keep society peaceful. Everyone becomes a cop at that point, if you will. Otherwise, you allow to be the victim of that felony at some point. Maybe someone else will bring the felony that they didn't get arrested. So there's other reasons why we come up with this, and I'm bringing up this First Amendment for the United States of America happens to be I want to be free to associate with people. When you censor people, I can't tell what kind of nut they might be, that I don't want to associate with them. Or how to denounce what they're doing. Knowing that they're there talking like that means nothing to anybody. Then we get to listen carefully. Are they about to go do something? No, that may be a little thing. You take away their view, all of a sudden now what you may have made, there's a better people that make better statements. When you are able to leave someone open to express something and be a safety valve, you take that away and you tell me what happens to the pressure in that vessel when it wants to act out. So our so-called politicians are just people getting vote because they could shuck and jive everybody in a system that shucked and jived everybody. You keep it up. Keep thinking that way. Keep going forced into that paddock. Let the step hen come and peck you. Oh, you prairie chickens. Google Clips automatically identifies everyone, including your pets, in the surveillance rundown. And I told you this a long time ago. This is the Silent Weapons for Quiet Wars. They have a place for you in the system. They get you to plug in, and you'll pay for it. Here's the story, folks. I don't know how long have I been saying that, and here's the proof of it. Are you looking forward to the holiday season? Do you want the latest in corporate advertised surveillance? Then hurry up and be the first one in your family to purchase the $249 Google Clips camera that automatically identifies you and your pets. Enough said, I think. Go ahead. Keep buying this stuff, folks. Keep getting involved with Google. That's right. Everyone else, too. Keep doing it. Keep getting your digital life hijacked and then having the government utilize the tools that it's there for. Big data, big corporate data, and big data government surveillance data. Keep it up. Here's the $249. You can pay $249 for you. Use your Bitcoin. Go ahead. Use that. So what's that thought, folks? What are you thinking about here? Are we thinking at all? Is that why hardly anybody got on the, when they saw the title, The Ignorant versus the Clueless at the 99.9%? Maybe there's a high probability they're not part of that. But maybe they don't want to tune in to find that out. See how smart we are? And I'm not judging anyone, because any one of you can be one of those people that are not going to be that 99.999%. Apparently I was right. I just guessed at the number. 324 of you in the country are the only ones that are stepping up out of 324 million. Pretty fascinating. And how do we know that? Remember the Equafix. Remember you're now in commerce. It's about the fiscal system. Oh, end the Fed. No, it's not going to end the system. Go ahead, end the Fed. Oh, we need an audit. Yeah, fine. You don't even understand the whole system. Well, you'll listen to a lot of people. And at that point, don't even listen to me. You go find out. You'll find out what you find out. It's going to be a whole lot different than what you're told. But this Equafix, in your credit, you found out you're a consumer whether you knew one or not. Everything that's being pulled in, all this data. Now, Google Clips, you're going to pay $249 to have your face attached to everything, every place you are, who you are with, all facial recognition, whoever wants to buy it, all in their possession and control. Keep it up. This isn't a joke. IRS just hired Equafix to safeguard taxpayer data. Now, they told you the consumer was in their database, and now the IRS shows up to give them millions of dollars to identify, tax, and safeguard taxpayer data. You think there's a correlation between those statuses, folks? You think the government just stepped up, and Equafix has always been a government entity, and they just stepped up out in the open and said, here, we need to have you safeguard this a little bit better. And they come out and tell you, oh, but the IRS's information is in a separate account that wasn't affected. Now, the truth of that I'm not getting at. I'm saying to you, you're watching the amoeba, the octopus, the tentacles are all over you. Everybody, oh, 7 million, it's a joke. This isn't a joke. We're giving Equafix more money. You have to understand why. The military is paying to make sure its infrastructure is solid, and that happens to be the IRS, the collection arm of the plunderer. Or they tell you so. And nobody seems to have an answer for this, but it's simple. And due process, so-called, will identify it, and it certainly makes a way for you to use the failure of the due process in order to make a record that shows that they don't have the authority that everyone gives them, even those that talk out against them. And I keep wanting to think about one guy, and I don't want to name him because everyone thinks I'm against it. I think this. I've already talked about him. He's written books. He's well known. He to me, has all the wrong answers about something he has no knowledge about, and his only knowledge is that he got in and got mangled by the machine that's going to mangle you. And he didn't have some basic things, and I'm not saying that those basic things may have saved him, but he would have certainly made a different record. IRS hired Equafix, the same people that lost all your consumer stuff, is now looking to safeguard their taxpayers. That should be a big light bulb moment for you all, folks. How this works. You plug in, they take control, you're subject. You're subject by the records they keep. How many times have I told you how to, they say there's a person in state, your so-called straw man, for all you folks that know about that. Big deal. You don't even know how to use it. Everyone has all this stuff and don't even know what it means. I told you how to show that the straw man doesn't exist. What did I say? I'll repeat it one more time here. Go to the Secretary of State, you type in the number that they have on an account that's all in caps, and you go see whether or not that's an entity in the state. When you find out that they have no record, hopefully you will, hopefully you know someone's not using your name as a doing business as, the DBA, did everybody think about that, folks? Doing business as name is your name? It's not your name. It's a name in the state. And you have just claimed that you do business as that. As, not is, as. So you go to the Secretary of State, excuse me if I said that wrong before, Secretary of State, and that's the corporate holdings officer. All the businesses in the state are registered there, or you're in some big trouble somehow, if you don't know the livelihood side. The commerce side has to be registered. You go put your name in there. It comes back, oh, that name doesn't exist as a business in the state, not a corporation. You're on the start, folks. You're on the beginning of identifying how that system starts to work. You've essentially proved a negative. Why isn't that so hard? If that name isn't there, and that's the only jurisdiction they have, then it should naturally fall out that they're making fraudulent records and using them against you. Oh, now we get into the Sesticate Trust, and and I'm going to take control on a utility, a transmission utility, all this nonsense. It's simply an account fabricated in order to do a thing. And you never figured out how things are compiled against you and shown wrong that they rely on, and they have the right to presume why, because it's in there and you went and answered to it without the challenge. Why? Oh, part of that's the jurisdictional challenge I talk about. There's a whole lot more, a ton more than what I talked about on that regarding the United States District Court. Here we go. This isn't a joke. See, the people at Zero Hedge think this is a joke, or it should be a joke. No, this is the fact. The IRS went to the company that keeps tabs of y'all and said, we're giving you money to make sure you safeguard those accounts because we can't afford to have any errors in our records when we go pummel these people for not complying. Tax ain't theft. I don't know. Tax is not theft. Did I pause enough there? Oh, tax is theft. Well, no, not when you look at the system. When you look at the fact that you just say tax is theft instead of identifying how someone's defrauded you, and it's beyond theft. And here on this, I wanted to talk about something else I can't really do, but this very issue has been put up right before a system that they're having a little bit of trouble on answering it, because the answer is that they are committing fraud on records used fraudulently to defraud people, men and women. And you don't tend to know that, and you don't care. You don't really do anything about it. You just complain, talk about all the straw men you know about, and that's supposed to be the beginning and the end. And the answers are all there to eliminate this and point out the criminals in your life. And I can't wait for the day that starts to happen for everybody. And it's partly why I keep coming. I'm going to sit here and tell you about it. Yeah, we went through a dark period, and I think societies, all of them, made the wrong decision. And so we're gonna reap what we have not sown. Is what it is. And that was that responsibility to keep ourselves safe and defendable against this nonsense. Can we stop a truly insane action against us? Well, no. There's no guarantees in nature either. And so this is not utopia, and this is not the silver bullet. What this is us gaining, taking the responsibility and gaining the control that we need so that it's not out of control. Not anarchy, no. That means that all that is a group of people that don't agree with a certain society they are a part of, a certain aspect of it. It's not anarchy. It's more like chaos. It's the time when you're put into some place that we now see takes professionals 20, 30 minutes to try and make sense of. Well, that's keeping your community safe and peaceful, isn't it? Now, touching last week where I talked about the 99.999%, that there was the group of the two, the ignorant versus the clueless, comes up this decision here. They found another study and they quantified something which seems completely normal to me when you see that 75% of the people are clueless regarding at least the United States government and the establishment of the three branches. And I told you I was so smart I had 4. A little pause there. I'll let you think about that. Go listen to last week's broadcast and you'll see what that was about if you didn't hear it. But to this week we find out 3 in 5 Americans agree the United States government must fight climate change. A new poll conducted by the Associated Press and NORC Center, the Energy Policy Institute of the University of Chicago, remember that's where the biggest carbon market is, that metro, all these words are important when you start looking around, published October 2nd, shows that 61% of U.S. citizens say the federal government should actively work to combat climate change. According to Trevor Thompson, the director of the AP NORC Center, majorities of both Democrats and Republicans agree that climate change is happening and that there are signs that consensus could happen on other issues too. Certainly, consensus is a felony. The politicians are all criminals. They're all committing treason. Do you think that's my opinion or not? Folks, that you've listened to me long enough, what have I told you is my proof? I am a party to a lawsuit that sued both those parties and the Bar Association, and they failed to come to answer to the very claim about climate change and in particular sustainable development. To me, it's not an opinion. How about you? So these people are found out to be the shills they are. We don't have to go very far. But here's the promotion of climate change. You buy into it. It's not a thing, folks. No, climate changes. We all know that. I'm not going to get into all that. My point is, it makes sense that if 99.99% of the people are either the clueless or the ignorant, that 3 out of 5 of those would believe anything. I'm actually kind of happy in a way. That means that 2 out of 5 might actually have more than 2 brain cells in their head to actually do something in the world. That's what's encouraging to me, actually. No? What do you think, folks? How do you approach all this problem? This is the propaganda that comes on us, and we either take a position on it or it will win because it's in the control seat at this point. Now, one thing that's been going on is that there's been a pushback. I told you this regime change between the Sovietization of the country and these, I guess you'd call them Marxists, these technocrats, the unqualified one, Obama, and then Hillary. There was no chance for this other aspect to have a chance to see the light of day again. And I was asking you then at the time of the election, give us that opportunity. Well, we happened to get that little opportunity. And out of the gate, they were talking about they weren't going to get the Paris Climate Treaty signed or agreed, but then you heard that they connected up. The point was that wasn't happening before. What we sued in 2013 is not going to be appreciated, maybe ever, if not, take a long time. But we were on the point of it then, and what we sued was essentially this thing called sustainable development, and more importantly, the methods of its imposition on the world as governance. That it was kind of encouraged, despite the 99.999%, only 3 out of 5 of those people think about climate change as something the government should do. Whether or not they think the government shouldn't do anything in its existence, I don't know. But there was 2 out of 5 that may have a chance that we can pull out. That was encouraging. To do the kinds of things that we now see are evidenced in this latest decision that would not have come out with the unqualified ones regime or anybody of that a particular persuasion. But this is something, and I want to use this as an example, which we don't usually talk about. This is something that we put a lot of time into ourselves and been a part of. I'm not going to make the claim that we had anything to do with the decision. I just know we can show the record that for 2 or 3 years, we were identifying the problems in writing, the way you're supposed to do through coordination that a government can do. You say, well, how do you deal with government behind the woodshed? Again, the mining districts are miners' government, and Congress acknowledged that in 1866. Not a mining district by name or by legal entity or tax status, not the tax status, but as a non-profit. You start doing that, you're not a mining district. You come underneath an association that's going to help give you a voice, you're not a mining district. In that capacity, you've just put the bindings on you. You just locked yourself down to the problem that would agree climate change is something the government needs to address, and will beat you down with it like a baby. You'll use it like a club, and you're a baby seal. But we've been working for a long time, and this week came out the fruition of this aspect of global governance, how they control societies. It's all about behavioral control as well. Not the only thing, but one of the main things that gets you to go where they want you to go. They got people thinking that that frauds or felonies against them are legitimate. That they are walking as accessories of the crimes against them. They have no way to extricate themselves from this unless and until some more people start to be examples otherwise. Here's one of the examples that working with in this situation can start to bring back what goes really wrong at the foundational level of a nation. In this case, uniquely to the United States of America in its property disposal laws and its focus on production, the things that make all the stuff you need, the sourcing of all that. That the DOI and the BLM scrap a 10 million acre mineral withdrawal, begin to unwind job-killing sage grouse policies, was a large story for us. No one talked to us. I'm just reading it off the internet. The point is, we've been involved to expose that the sage grouse so-called science was a fraud. Scientists didn't even want to sign on to this. The BLM culture of crime wanted to advance it, and they have been. Until someone got into the system specific to this agency and an administration that looked into this not being a crime, they found out that what we were saying, at least of record, whether they saw our stuff or not, I can't prove. I do know people were reflecting in agencies what they wouldn't have known without what we did. And in particular, one of my colleagues he's the point of the spear, and I guess I could say I kind of give him the shaft on this. I give him all the support he needs to push through on the law side and interpretation that he works through with people on the other end, and he's got to talk to people there. He does that better than I ever will do. Like I said, I'm certainly not the Tony Robbins. It's not like I can't talk with you. You hear me talk for 2 hours. You hear how I am. You hear how I talk. But that seems to rub some people the wrong way, and that's not good when we're trying to get getting politicians to agree or listen, or broadcasters even coming forward. So I tried to find those that are interested in what their problem was, that do have that capacity. My colleague's one of those guys. Fascinating power he is. He was on the head of this. We were behind the scenes putting this policy in. Coordination was how we funneled this information through, and it took a few years and a lot of work from a lot of other people. I'm not certainly saying that we were the only ones. You'll read a story. I'll get you a link. Have the link. Then this was coming from the Western Caucus members. I don't even know who those people are. They've certainly been involved. That you go through and you see that the government now actually applied the law, in particular the NEPA, and stated that the NEPA provisions were not invoked properly and not completed properly, that you could withdraw the minerals. Jefferson Mining District said you have to do a mineral survey before you can even start to have the process. And so they focused right on the point of the fact of the failure of administrative rule, that when you read the law, instead of what the environmentalists will tell you, instead of what the climate scientists will tell you, instead of what the carbon tax people want to tell you, instead of what any other eco-terrorists would want to tell you, the law is there to protect the environment of mankind. And it balances against the needs of the natural environment from which man derives his stuff. And we see the laws, all the laws show that extraction, the development and extraction, you're really, really smart and wise to do it smart and wise, not intelligent and wise, not smart, that's the new stuff. Intelligent and wise. And when you don't, you degrade that environment. And when you degrade that environment, you degrade you, your nation, your wealth, and everything else. There's an internal wisdom to proper management of the watershed. Not the landscape, not the wildscape, no, the watershed, from which every product comes to us. There are all kinds of watersheds in all different areas. They're to be managed for improving production, which necessarily means you are also having to improve that environment. That when the federal government has constraints and they don't follow it, you start to destroy wealth. And this is what this is speaking to. Our contribution can't be known. I can only show, eventually we'll show, and I've been talking to some colleagues, and I'll have to get this passed through or talk to the assembly of the district. We don't normally publish what we do, but when we come to fruition of something, when we have an answer, we then do publish. I think this has now come to fruition enough that the assembly can decide, they will decide that we can publish this on JeffersonMiningDistrict.com to show exactly how this thing works over time, that you can play a part in being part of the support to bring a better thought to how things are supposed to work. And all it is identifying the criminals intending to plunder, the pirates intending to plunder this thing that we all were supposed to protect. And so I don't know if this is really a big deal, whether or not we can had any part of that. I know our information got put into through here. We got enough feedback about that. The point is, without that input and without people in the line of authority that weren't informed of what was going wrong, this could not have happened. And so NEPA has to be implemented. They mentioned, particularly, I thought I saw the EIS, Environmental Impact Statement. That's the impact. Environment includes the impact to natural environment and the environment of mankind. The word environment is a two-part forked definition. In the acts, when you see them talking about coordination to do the studies to find the impacts of the environment, they're talking about the impact to the natural environment and the impact to mankind's environment, and the balance is such that you do everything practicable in order to protect the natural environment, but not so much as it starts to degrade the environment of mankind. So this is a total different review when you start seeing that there's supposed to be checks and balances to protect our society, to protect our counties, to protect the revenue flows into the counties from natural resources so it doesn't come out of your pocket through property taxes. The ability then to free up the fact that the property taxes are another theft that needs to be removed. If you don't start to get back to the foundations of this law, the bright line, it's real easy to understand. We're little able to do much things when we see the breads and circuses of a shooting star, like something coming out of Las Vegas, or something more natural such as the one that's in the meteors coming into the environment. So a lot of Americans may think about climate change. There's two out of five of those that they asked that say that's a problem. I'm suggesting to you that within the context of the sage-grouse policies is the sustainable development, is the environmental imposition. It is what we address directly. We use the law. We bring it without equivocation, with no opinion. We show what was supposed to happen. We identify what failed to happen in order to cause the protections. And we now have evidence that someone's listening now. And really, at some point, I'm not saying we're right. I'm saying, well, why don't you go through the process and make sure that we're not having any real trouble we're developing. You can't tell me when you have an industry that develops $3 trillion in wealth, a mineral industry that now develops $3 trillion of wealth, that you want to impact that in any way. And it can do so in an environmentally benign way. And most times now the technology is such that that's getting even better. I know the images of the old miner is out there, and some of that still happens. That's going to happen. That's just who we are and how we do it. The point is it's not actually pervasive, and I don't think that there's a mentality, once you understand that you're bringing peace, settlement, production, wealth to people, that they want to mess that up once they're informed correctly. So we have evidence that the process is working. It does take people in the system of the process that can actually effectuate that. And we were looking at a real impossibility in the unqualified ones regime that we're now not seeing happening. The sage-grouse is going to be pulled back from being the impetus under the Endangered Species Act because it did not actually follow the government agencies did not follow the process to properly identify the sage-grouse and or produce whatever it needed to find out what was practicable to do to encourage it or save it. The information that our watershed trained colleague says was identified to be predators has been acknowledged, and so they have a real problem. There's an additional problem that's developed that may be blind to most all people. We also have a colleague miner who did everything on their claim to enhance the environment, and he understands how. He's a watershed specialist. And so he was able to produce collateral to wanting to see more birds and more animals and whatever. And they got water coming out of their mine, their hard rock mine. They made ponds and stuff, and they planted grass and all kinds of stuff for the animals. And they can still function. This is what miners can do, and they do. These guys did. They found out no matter what they do, they cannot save the sage-grouse. Is one of the major things about impacts and what they impose upon mankind to try and save, that once you find that limit of what can be done, it dissolves the impetus. In other words, there's nothing more that you can do to save it. If it's going to die, the species is going to die. And they don't want that truth out either. And so I'm learning a lot, we're watching a lot, I'm blessed to be around people, very capable, knowledgeable people in subject matter areas outside of what I do, that we can take what we learn and we start to apply it in very focused ways to conform what hasn't been done, to comply with constraints that have been put on all this stuff in order to make things work better. And what you're watching is a subversion of all that. In almost everything you see, the method we enjoined or sued to enjoin that in law is to be enjoined is now kind of reflecting itself out in the lifting of all those things that came by that process to defeat your local locales. I'll just say that. So I hope that's an interest to you. This isn't totally innocuous, totally no jeopardy area. There's no reason why anybody that lives out west shouldn't be involved in some of this as well. And you don't have to know everything. You just have to know a few things, be specializing in one area. You don't have to be overwhelmed. You also get to get involved and do something that's really valuable. I mean, I can't imagine what this is going to do to miners. Miners, listen, you miner, you're listening, and those 10 million acres that are going to be open again. I'm not sure when the order went through. It might have already happened. Those lands have been put back into service for y'all. Okay, you got all that? Every one of you, anybody listening now, you go find if there's some place that you were told you can't go, and if it was part of this mineral, not everywhere, just these mineral withdrawal areas, they are now open, and you can use this mining law to go stake you a piece of ground and develop a valuable mineral deposit for your wealth. Your money's in that bank. And so the sage grouse has been being used as a club to beat us baby seals, and the federal government has looked and said, you failed to do a process mandated by the Congress to protect the people in the local in the counties. They call them rural areas. That's a derogatory term, in the countryside. And when you failed to do what administrative law is to do in execution of Congress's will, intent, purposes, and obligations and duties, you failed the law and you failed to serve the people, and we're going to pull that all back. It is a momentous change. That wouldn't have happened. I can't see it happening under the prior regimes. And so we have an opportunity. If I can encourage you all, if you had a second thought, or you didn't quite know, if you have any inklings at all, this is a place that we're going to need a lot of help right now. We're getting on the right side of the wave, I guess I can say. And as I said, we're going to be surfing, and it's not going to be quite the tsunami. And I think it's going to be, it can have the potential of being quite enjoyable, only to the extent it brings back what the law was to provide for all of us. So a little bit of fruition coming out in what we work on. And it doesn't matter in one regard that we don't, whether or not they even saw our stuff. I don't know how they couldn't, but neither here nor there. We were on the correct path. We were on the right side of things, if I can say that. We were in the law to promote the right thing by the right way. Again, we didn't make one mistake in this. And there's enough knowledge going out there now to see, and people are speaking in similar ways, to be able to speak in unison of the failures. It doesn't work when you go another way. It doesn't work when consensus rules. The other article wants to find that consensus can help. No, that's a felony against you. It's how they got to the point of being able to get the withdrawals, was that consensus process. You want to continue that, or do you just want to follow the law? How about if we just do that? But everyone wants to say, oh, it's just the law. No, it's the objective basis by which we interact with each other in a society on things bigger than us. If I can get people to see that part. I'm totally not in the government. The government's just this big criminal thing. And it's just the people in it. But until we start getting more people knowledgeable about how the thing works, we're not going to be able to, they hide underneath this consensus stuff like it's real. They don't rise to the top as being the festering wound we need to pull out of the system. And another thing that may have been part of the outcry, wouldn't have happened, I don't think, without the internet, without people engaging, right, wrong, or indifferent about what they thought was going on, but to be the din of witness, the witness of the conversation. Another BLM or Department of Interior thing has happened a few weeks ago, I believe. Key BLM figure in the Bundy Ranch raid, Dan Love, fired for corruption and theft. This is a big thing. This wasn't happening before. Now, the administration is touting accountability, but when you look at this story, as I've been talking with my colleagues on this, the limitation in the report is they're only looking at the corruption and the constraints that were put on lower employees from telling supervisors there was crimes going on within the agency. The story you'll read, if you look at the omission, it doesn't speak to you and me outside. Now, that doesn't mean we're not going to now use this as a pry bar to say, well, if you wanted accountability, here's what your underlings are doing to cause crimes and felonies under state law and federal law. So we're going to use, if you're interested in accountability, we need you not to start internally, which may need to be done, to out someone like Dan P. Love, fired for corruption and theft. And they did it on things that are really not relevant to what I would be wanting to see him being fired of, actually more importantly. But it's now beginning to happen that we can now say, well, if you really want to do accountability, we need you to look at this also. And so that would not have been a case where people had not been pushing on the walls here of the castle and the culture of crime within the agencies. This would not have been happening. Now I think they're kind of doing a cover-up with their limitations. There's more crime everywhere that can be uncovered, and if you're sitting in the peanut gallery or watching the breads and circuses or watching the shooting stars in Las Vegas, you're going to miss the whole thing. They're going to get that agenda by, and you're not going to be helping people like the Bundings, and you're not going to be able to focus everybody on the proper point, something that Dan P. Love was bent and probably tasked to make sure you were all obscured over. So, the administration's coming forward to do some accountability. That's all we're asking for, folks, isn't it? At least let's start with accountability. You should be on board with that, and if you are, then you should be able to start looking in a direction that you want to go to make someone accountable. If you understand about this public land a little bit, public domain, a little bit of the law that I'm talking about here, the congressional acts are set in stone. They have absolute authority on what they say they're supposed to do, and to the extent that they're supposed to do it. I think that's a pretty bright line to start from. It's a good foundation that we now have a regime, a change that's actually trying to mitigate some of the harms that the prior regime did. And if that's all the little bitty mouse hole of access we get, I think we better take it, because we don't have another one, do we? And I think that's an important problem we have to take into consideration. What else are we going to do now? But the tide is turning a little bit. We have the ability to move back in and make a proper complaint against these people that are acting against you. It takes a little bit. If you know a little bit of the law, then you can keep on the narrow path, and it's not that hard of a deal. We don't find ourselves trying to write novels over how much constitutions and what they all mean. No, these laws are actually affecting all that. They're impliedly active. We don't have to talk about them. So now we're just on the criminal edge of it. All we got to do is identify that part and how. That becomes a lot easier thing, and so the only way I know to train all that train you up into that is read the black and white that these people are supposed to follow. Remember, their discussion was for internal administration. None of those laws pertain to you. Should be another silent proof of what these laws actually apply to. They put them on us, and they're not actually applicable that way. When you look at the courts, they're not actually courts for us, but they might be in a territory of administration. Not actually land at all. It's the territory of the jurisdiction of administration, internal administration. So, just as a thought for those of you doing things there, as I think about that internal administration, I don't know why it popped up about the broadcast, and a lot of people out sending the links to the file. Thank you again. I wanted to say that I saw it again. I think I've been here 2017 on Minds.com. Thank you again for what you do there. Rancho 42, which you keep picking up on Twitter and the interaction. I don't have a lot of time to do a lot of that anyway, and I don't understand some of it. A lot of it doesn't make any sense to me. It's just really not. It's just like a foreign thing. But I appreciate what you all been doing. Don't get back and talk to you too much. Again, it's just a forum that I'm not too sure about. And Vine in the RLM chat, Vince Easley, thank you very much on what you do there. Anyway, everybody that's just been supportive, I do appreciate that. The numbers kind of fluctuate, but I think they're generally moving along slowly. One more every week or two. This thing is going out. So again, it's the whole point about sending out stuff. I just want you to see that I think you're thinking, a lot of people think wrong. I think you think you're right, and it's not. It just doesn't work out. You know that by what you're doing. If you're not going anywhere, if you're still complaining about the same things you were complaining about 10 years ago, you're not going anywhere. That should be a self-proof. Change something, folks. Move it, shake it up a bit. I'm trying to give you some of those tools to show you that the win that we have is so subtle. Stop trying to take that ego thing. Look at it long range. Look at it. Maybe other people have to help. I think they do. I couldn't do this myself. I mean, certainly cannot put together what has happened all on my own. It would have never happened. Now, my contribution is 100% in whatever direction I'm going, but that's the other point. I'm laser focused on that. I may have dozen things to do, but they're all really kind of correlating to the same subject matter. And so I would ask you all, if you're still doing something after 10 years listening to me or whatever else, someone else you listen to all this time, you're still doing the same tapping on the same keyboard in the same chat rooms, okay, that's fine. I go there too, but I'm not, I have a whole lot of other stuff that I have to do, and we just keep focused on it. And I'm trying to show you that this is not just a fairy tale utopia. Things are working. They're very small in some regard, but they have can you think about that, folks? We had 10 million acres shut out of mineral development to a 3 trillion tango. $3 trillion of wealth every year, 10 millions of acres of which were cut out on a crime, essentially, the failure of law, and everyone was okay with that. And I really don't get that. It's like us. We're drawn to the wrong thing, and so I want to touch back at the shooting star of Las Vegas. I mean, we're drawn to the wrong things. There's reasons why you can be drawn there, but we seem to be drawn for the wrong things. And I hope I offered something about, yes, I did look at that, and probably a lot more maybe than I had originally. I thought not to look at it, but because it was such a lesson even for me, I started analyzing myself as well in this. That it's now, again, it was just allow me to focus on sharpening maybe what I do. It was predictable, so that wasn't it at all. It has to do with our response to it. I'm certain of that. And I don't know what more to say on some of this. Our response is an action thing. So in the process of outing people in the government, you need records, and everything has to be found in writings. And so I moved something up that I haven't been able to get. It's been falling back and back and back in the tabs. I put up 20 tabs more than I need to. That's kind of like a constant now. I don't know. I mean, I just found this out. I was looking last night. I put up 20 tabs more than I ever get to every week here. That my tabs are getting longer and longer. And so anything that's put up before and I don't get to gets lost. That I remembered this was in here and relevant to people getting involved, how you approach the records, how you make the records. You need to have evidence. You need to have the evidence of what's gone on. And part of that is done by what's called a Freedom of Information Act request. Local to the states, it's probably a public records request. There's two different ones. I've talked a little bit about this in the past, but something's come up and I want you to be aware of it. And this is the thing you need, one of the things you kind of need to be aware of and be ready for. Again, look at the process. It is an interesting problem. But I think it's one that can be, I don't know if it's so much an exploitation, but it can be utilized in such a way, if you know a little bit, to kind of keep things in a neutral keel and put the pressure on the side that's trying to keep you from information put them back over where they don't have that excuse that when you go out now and try to find a FOIA, and we talked a bit about it, the government will turn the tables by suing public records requesters. Became a news item a couple weeks ago, and I found that very interesting. It's a very interesting attack. Not cool, but nonetheless interesting to look at. And so it requires, again, as I looked at that immediately, we need to know better, and we'll stay federal at this point, I think. Well, I can't. It's going to be a public records request, not a FOIA. But FOIA is easy to find, I guess is the point there. I guess a public records request for each and every state you can find, but federal is one big thing, and under Title V, it's a FOIA act, and so I can deal with that in pointing out some things. Let me read a setup here. An Oregon parent wanted details about school employees getting paid to stay home. A retired educator sought data about student performance in Louisiana. A college journalist in Kentucky requested documents about the investigations of employees accused of sexual misconduct. Instead, they got something else, sued by the agencies they had asked for the public records. The government bodies are increasingly turning the tables on citizens who seek public records that might be embarrassing or legally sensitive. And I found those 2 points very important with respect to what a FOIA requires in one aspect. Legally sensitive. Of course they are if you're on track. That's what it's all about. And so they've got it, in my view, they put their foot right on the pulse, they put their finger on the pulse of the problem, and that's what you go and you address. So that's it in a nutshell. In your letter, you'll address that very point. Or in your FOIA request. Instead of granting or denying the request, a growing number of school districts, municipalities, and state agencies have filed suits against people making requests. Taxpayers, government watchdogs, and journalists who must then pursue the records in court at their own expense. Now, this is a potential fact, and this becomes a thing you have to kind of start to factor in. The lawsuits generally ask the judge that the rule that the records being sought do not have to be divulged. The name, that's a key, the name of the requesters as defendants, but do not seek damage awards. Still, the recent trend has alarmed freedom of information advocates who say it's becoming a new way the government to hide information, delay disclosure, and intimidate critics. This practice essentially says to a records requester, file a request at your peril. All right, so this is the notice to us. And so let me just offer, let me see, I better go to another one here. Across the United States, states try to block access to the public records request. And here's the hypocrisy of how this thing works, is why I think I wanted to talk about that same type of an issue. In February, Arkansas lawmakers marked the 50-year anniversary of the Freedom of Information Act with a resolution calling it, quote, a shining example of open government, close quote, that had ensured access to vital public records for generations. They spent the following week debating and, in many cases, approving new exemptions to the law in what critics called an unprecedented attack on the public's right to know. So there's another clue right there now that I read that part. There's more to read and more important, a lot of important things to go through about this. And I sometimes I wonder if I shouldn't take more time to ferret this out, but it may not be worth the time if you're not really familiar with the subject matter, and that's part of the problem of the balance. So, what is this? What is the right? What's the right behind the Freedom of Information Act? It's not just the right to know. What are the limitations as well? Because you heard about the Arkansas talked about how great it was, and then saying, well, but you're not going to use it in these areas. So, what was the guiding principle? So I went and just found a place that was talking about it. Don't remember now how I even got to this decision. It was a discussion about it in a court case. They tell you a limitation. Now remember, they talked about the legal sensitivities. So that's the one end, I'll tell you. And then the other one is what is it not? Well, it's not to expose people that have privacy interests at stake. So here, let me read off a couple paragraphs to set that stage, to show you, give you a parameter on what you're thinking about as you write your paper of request. And they do have to be very, very specific. And again, all that can be learned. And after a discussion partway through this case, they go into a paragraph that starts, on the other hand, the private interests at stake were significant. The private interests were significant. So privacy matters here. Because much of the information sought involved allegations of sexual misbehavior involving specific individuals, the court found that the information was of a, quote, very personal nature, close quote, and its disclosure, quote, would constitute a serious invasion of personal privacy, close quote, of the complainants. The court therefore held that the disclosure of the entire complaint file would be a, quote, clearly unwarranted invasion of personal privacy within the meaning of the Act. So the complete complaint file that was being requested was an unwarranted invasion. Should tell you about the specificity that you have to put in your notice. The opinion, the next paragraph goes on, in the Board of Examiners makes clear that the public interest to be weighed is a very specific one, namely, the interest in monitoring the activities of government. There's the phrase. What is your purpose? It's an interest to monitor the activities of government, and I add in building evidence of a probable cause-based crime committed by the agency or its employees. Boy, how legally sensitive is that, folks? You add the part about why. Is to check, to monitor the government because you have probable cause to believe a crime is going on and you need this information for a future prosecution. Add that, period. Got it? Pretty simple. Just add that. Now, under waiver of fees, that's relevant to the waiver of fees, because if it is for that, they have to waive the fees. It's not by the limit. They'll try to get you to have to pay, but up to your first 100 copies or something. But once it comes underneath this model, you can actually have all that waived as well. That may take a little bit of a fight, but it may take another letter, but that's how it works. Or they may give you the exact case about why I'm wrong, and that's been adjusted. These court cases can come along and adjust it. It hasn't been up until recently that this has all been the same, that I've been doing this, or had people do this, that it starts to work better for them, notwithstanding what they're doing. So when you put all this stuff in and you say this is for a court case, if they try to go and say that they're going to try and test this to make sure it doesn't expose personal information, you quickly identify that they weren't able to do it in the first place, and this is used as a pretext to cover their crime. You answer back. And that may come out in the record before you even have to go to there. And that comes out when they denied records. You have to do another request. And how I do that is what happened in the Forest Service is I'd already sent 4 communications. I did a FOIA request on information regarding our mining claim relative to a certain thing, and put all these other caveats in, and requested that, and they came back and said, we have no documents on file as per your request. And I loaded that thing up to be able to respond to that. I've anticipated that obstruction, and I came back and said, well, it's obvious that you are essentially lying, because what you should have returned was the 4 letters I've already sent you on that case. So you load up what you're going to do to catch them before it even has to go to court. You make your record, as I've been telling you, to show they have no right. So when they come back and say, we have nothing we can do, or they want to come back and sue you, your answer is that, well, you never asked for personal information. And the thing you were demanding was for monitoring and or future prosecution of probable cause-based crimes is not an easy thing for them to overcome. If I can quickly go to these things, there's probably a little bit more to speak about, but let me get back a little quickly here. The Board of Examiners make, out of the system's words, the state's words, government, makes clear. The opinion of the Board of Examiners makes clear that the public interest to be weighed is a very specific one, namely the interest in monitoring the activities of government. There it is, what your point is. In other words, the Act does not favor openness for its own sake or as a general principle, but rather specifically to advance the cause of good government. You add that to your statement. And I'm doing this for the cause of good government. You throw it in. So when someone's reading through this, they realize you've been watching. You're a watchdog. It says the next sentence, this watchdog theory of open records is significant because it clearly circumscribes the public interest a court may consider when describing whether an invasion or privacy is warranted under circumstances. Zinc versus Commonwealth is the next paragraph, number 2. These principles received further application and clarification in Zinc, Commonwealth versus the Commonwealth of Kentucky. Zinc, an attorney sought the disclosure of employers' first report of injury forms filed with the Department of Workers Claims. These forms included personal information about the injured employees, such as name, home address, phone number, age, and wage rate. The attorney intended to use the information to target direct mail solicitations to potential clients. The court observed that the forms at issue contained information, quote, that touches upon the personal features of a private lives. Specifically, individuals have some expectation of privacy with respect to their marital status, number of dependents, wage rate, social security number, think IRS here, Equafix, home address, and telephone number. Finding a privacy interest at stake, the court turned its attention to the extent of the public interest in disclosure. And I won't read more. There's more to read. Very clear, it seemed to me. What do you put in your statement? You now put ahead of time. You put in, you don't expect that they will need to provide anything that touches upon the personal features of the private lives of anybody that you're talking about. So you start to build into your letters now a little bit more than maybe even anybody understood they needed to do until I started talking about it. But that's what you start to do. You build in a defense against their ability to say that you asked for something they couldn't give you. And therefore, they don't have the ability to go and test that in a court. Because this whole thing about the lawsuits, whether it goes from the state agency or not, is to test it. Now, once you get them making an allegation that you claim something they needed protected, that's a pretext that they didn't have to invoke that attempts to take away your right to claim. That could be a felony in your state. I know it's a felony in this Oregon state over here they talked about. Whether or not it's a misdemeanor in your state, I don't know. But they can't make a piece of set up a piece of information that interferes with a claim or a defense that you have. And so there could be the fraud of omission to clarify that you had a record that showed. And so when they go into court, you may have to enter that court. But you come back with an attack saying that this is just a pretext suit. It actually is, if we go to equity, it's not actually in clean hands. They know I didn't request the things they couldn't give. And the law didn't allow it anyway. And there's nothing here to test. And it was to check, and you just redo your letter back to them. And it was to check, we had good government. The probable cause belief of this right now is they don't, and now they're trying to get away with their crime. It's not going to be some kind of a case they want to lose too often, I think. My opinion, but that's what I think. And I've seen when we start to address things that way, it seems to go really much better. Okay? And I certainly got my paperwork back from the Forest Service when I identified they should have at least given me back my copies of my own record to them. See, they couldn't do that either because that would show that they were wrong to begin with to make me go and do that. So, as I said, I've got tons of tabs. I was going to walk into this Bitcoin industry merger, Ethereum connection. I got a whole string of stuff for that. Maybe I'll get to that maybe next week. But understand I was not wrong about telling you how the global governance finance system is adjusting into this digital tokens. The whole system's going. We got it all. They're all working on it. They've been working on it, folks. This is not hard to see. Only the people that want to stay blind to the obvious, weak to their own frailties, is going to be the ones that are going to be really surprised here. We need to see it and be ahead of that game so we can step aside of that train coming down the tracks. Thank you for tuning in today. I hope something I said gave you information that you can use and start up. Thank you, Grimner, for what you do. Jules, thank you for what you do at ucy.tv, and again, Grimner at reallibertymedia.com. And terrestrial broadcasters, thank you for what all you've been doing. Those that I haven't really talked with, I'd maybe check in with us. And there's nothing that we'd have to do something. I'm saying let's do it more proper. I think I give you enough examples on how all that works. And again, there's more answers to what I even do, but they're there. This is not we've been doing it wrong in the past. We've taken on different ideas, all wrong. We don't understand how to even apply what we do know that's right, I find. When I refer to people who read the constitutional law, this is the Constitution says this, this, and that. You don't understand the proper laws are actually in fulfilling that Constitution. Quit arguing with it. Get on to where the problem really is. And I don't know if people really want to do that. That's an interesting observation. So, thank you for tuning in today. Hope something I said, again, helps you. Please just engage. Be amazed at what's available. I think together we'll see how fast it all starts to work as we start seeing evidence today of how they get us the ring in our nose and how we get they use us as a human fodder, or on the other hand, how we keep working along and actually things come about and work for our good and not our death. I'll be back with you next week. Tech diffs or nature willing. Well, that's another lesson. I hope with today's information you can take it to those that misbehave. From behind the woodshed, leaving his mark on the beast, this is Hal Anthony. Till next time, journey with purpose.
Well, that's what opening up a can of whoop-ass feels like.
Son, you just opened a whole case of whoop-ass.